You know, it's always hard as a small business owner to pay people more. Believe me, you want to. It's in a way almost like it's a type of gut feeling that you feel responsible for their well-being and their family's well-being. I always wish I could pay them more, but I also have to be reasonable and understand that that's just not realistic sometimes. The current minimum wage here just is not enough. I think the $15 wage is a bit excessive, but I do think we need something. I always thought it would be good to have a liquid minimum wage. For example, have the wage fluctuate as the housing market and inflation rates change. This would make it a hell of a lot easier on a lot of people working minimum wage jobs. It's an interesting thought because we have so many hyper wealthy people. You would think that it's only right that minimum wage is more than $10 an hour. I mean, we have people in Seattle that are making a few million a year, living blocks away from homeless shelters, and people struggling to get by on 30 grand a year, if that. You know, I don't mean to sound harsh or anything here. I know the vast majority of people that have minimum wage jobs are very hard workers, but at the same time, I don't think it's a job you're supposed to have for your entire life. The reason that it pays minimum wage is because it doesn't require skill, and I think that more needs to be done to promote skill building programs to help people advance themselves in society. I mean, if we start by creating an adjustable minimum wage and then create skill building programs, I think that we can solve a lot of socioeconomic problems. Of course, that's only if people are thinking of it as a living wage. I think we need to move away from that idea and use those jobs to help people build skills to get better jobs in the future. Some areas of the country, especially down south, they don't really have a livable minimum wage. People are only making like $23,000 a year, and it's completely unsustainable. It's just not possible to live on that amount. In general, I think that this country as a whole needs to do something to fix our minimum wage problem. Even though it is state controlled, the federal government could step in and do something like set standards of living that minimum wage need to be able to provide. I guess that's just my opinion on all this, and of course that has been influenced by my upbringing, but I think we need to do more to make it possible for people to live on minimum wage jobs for at least short periods of time, but I don't think it should be a lifelong job. I never really had the opportunity to go to college or to get an education any higher than high school. I went to a local community college for about one semester, but it just wasn't for me, and I could barely afford to pay the tuition anyways. Before I joined the Army, I worked about four minimum wage jobs. I worked at McDonald's, I was a painter, and other handyman type jobs. It was really difficult to get by, and at times I'd have to skip a meal so that I could save a little more money to pay rent. Eventually, that lifestyle, it wore me down, and I decided to join the Army. Let me just say this now. The Army is nothing like the recruitment videos. Your base pay as a private is terrible and can actually be below minimum wage, but they get away with it because they pay for your food and shelter. Obviously, once you've been in for as long as I was, they start to actually pay you well, and if you go into special forces, you get a $120,000 bonus after your 15th year of service. If I look back at the decisions I made and the people that I met when I first joined the military, I think it's safe to say that a lot of the people I was with were escaping the same situation that I was. Uh, from my experience working minimum wage, I can say that it was definitely not enough. I personally think the minimum wage should be much higher, like maybe 12.50 an hour maybe. That way people can actually sustain themselves and their families. So instead of working two jobs, a parent can go to night school in the time where they would normally be working the night shift. I think that is something we overlook in society. People assume someone can just work two minimum wage jobs, but in that scenario, nobody ever advances themselves. If we follow that mindset and those ideas, then we'll have a segment of society that is doomed from birth to barely scrape by their entire life. I think that the minimum wage in this country has stayed stagnant for too long, and our economy has changed so much in that time. I think that a lot of the disparity of wealth in this country is because of this. I mean, sure, there will always be people that are poor for whatever reason, be it their fault or not, but I think that we as a country are losing our middle class, and I think that's the biggest disparity in the whole wealth gap thing. On the topic of how minimum wage employees are treated, I'm sure it varies by company and area, but in my experience, I received zero benefits whatsoever. I personally think that somebody working a full-time job, even if it only pays minimum wage, should receive at least health care from their place of work. I know this is difficult because most small businesses won't be able to provide this, so one idea would be to cut taxes on small businesses so they can afford to properly take care of their employees. I guess all this is just how I feel about it, but I just think that people working minimum wage deserve a better quality of life than they currently get. I just think it's unfair that some segment of society should have a poor quality of life just because they were born into poverty because they can't afford to pay for some ridiculous college tuition. I think it is a society we need to do a better job of taking care of people in general and that we need to be more understanding. I just think minimum wage is ridiculously low and that it needs to have a significant increase in the immediate future if we want anything to get better.